Thank you very much. Your Excellency, may I say President Mary Robinson, Mrs. Nana Nan, former High Commissioner Zaid Rad Al-Hussein, Madame Barbi Chapuis, and Professor Achim Venman, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Welcome to the 4th edition of the Kofi Annan Geneva Peace Address, a high-level lecture on peace, delivered by a distinguished personality with a wealth of knowledge and experience, held every year as part of Geneva Peace Week. It is organized by the Kofi Annan Foundation, the Geneva Graduate Institute, and the Geneva Peacebuilding Platform. 6 years ago, on August the 18th, 2018, Kofi Annan, the 7th Secretary General of the United Nations, passed. And the world lost an extraordinary leader, an icon of peace and diplomacy. His vision, his compassion, and his wisdom are sorely missed in the world today. As crises multiply, from bloody conflicts to military coups, rising hunger and natural disasters, we are in dire need of courageous, imaginative, and ethical leadership of the kind he showed on so many occasions. Kofi Annan used to say, and I quote, "We have the means and we have the capacity to deal with our problems, if only we can find the political will." This is precisely the mandate of the Kofi Annan Foundation. His legacy lives on through the foundation he established in 2007 to serve as a catalyst for political will, lasting peace, and inclusive governance. There are, by the way, copies of the Foundation's annual report in the hall. Please help yourselves to copies after the address and find out how the extraordinary initiatives of the Foundation impact communities worldwide, empowering young leaders, promoting peace and democracy, and advocating for international cooperation, which is just what Kofi Annan would have wanted. Before I invite the first speaker, allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to extend a very warm welcome to Mrs. Nana Nan, lawyer, artist, strong advocate of equal rights for women and girls. Mrs. Annan stood by the side of Kofi Annan for over 35 years. Kindred spirit, soulmate, and beloved wife. They were, to us all, role models of mutual respect and collaboration, true partners in life. Thank you for joining us today. I would now like to invite Professor Achim Venman, Director of Strategic Partnerships, Professor of Practice in the Interdisciplinary Program, Nagulendran Chair in Peace Mediation, and Faculty Associate at the Center on Conflict, Development, and Peacebuilding at the Geneva Graduate Institute. Professor Venman, the floor is yours, sir.
Colleagues, friends, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear Ms. Annan, allow me on behalf of the organizers to wish you a very warm welcome to this year's edition of the Kofi Annan Geneva Peace Address. The organizers united behind this annual flagship moment are the Kofi Annan Foundation, the Geneva Graduate Institute, the Geneva Peacebuilding Platform, and the Co-Initiatives of Change Foundation. We would also like to recognize the precious support of the Republic and State of Geneva and the City of Geneva. It was exactly in this very auditorium, in fact, right over there, which were one of Kofi Annan's last public appearances. And he called for something very specific as he was talking about the escalation between United States and Russia on Syria in April 2018. He called for cool heads and sober judgment. Now, I think this is exactly the type of guidance that is so important today. It's guidance for us to prevent to fall in the trap that war is messy or that peace is a distant ideal. Instead, we should recall that organized violence is a cold, calculated, and brutal type of politics or business. In the face of the proliferation of such power-based politics that we are seeing today, or economics by other means, it is important that peace builders go back to the basics and convince those in power that peace is more desirable than war. And that if indeed they are ready for peace, they need to prepare for peace and not for war. So, if not during Geneva Peace Week and in Geneva, then what better place is it to hold a keynote lecture, the Geneva Kofi Annan Peace Address, on the topic of rising peace builders? Because indeed they need to rise in the current day and age where the imagination of war and conflict is on the everyday experience of those who are consuming news. There is no better place than the Maison de la Paix to affirm our support to the Kofi Annan Geneva Peace Address, and there is, of course, no better distinguished speaker than Mary Robinson, the chair of the Elders, first woman president of Ireland, and former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, to speak about this topic to us today. We are also eager to hear from the 3 young peace builders who will participate in a discussion with His Excellency Zaid Rad Al Hussein alongside President Robinson, because the intergeneral dimension is, of course, very, very close to our heart here at the Geneva Graduate Institute. We think it's important to foster an inclusive understanding about the aspiration and concerns of the next generation as we are speaking about rising peace builders, and indeed the next generation of peace builders. We would also like to thank Ecolint Orchestra for having accepted to give us a short performance tonight. As we are speaking about these difficult topics, we also need some musical inspiration for guidance. I would like once again to thank you all in the name of all our partners for being here with us tonight. It is a great honor to welcome you to the Geneva Graduate Institute and to the Kofi Annan Geneva Peace Address. With these words being said, allow me now to invite on stage Ms. Marie Barbet-Chapuis, who's a member of the Executive Council of the City of Geneva, for her words of welcome. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure for me to be representing the Geneva authorities for this 2024 edition of the Kofi Annan Peace Address. I want to thank the Kofi Annan Foundation and its partners for the invitation and for this opportunity to be on stage with you tonight. Obviously, talking about peace in such troubled times is not a simple task. The last few weeks, and even the last few years, have made peace seem like a very distant goal in our troubled world. The times we are living in hardly seem to provide us with reasons for hope. Dreaming of a better and more peaceful future is probably not as easy in 2024 as it might have been a few years ago. However, if we go past the grim prospects that we seem to be facing, there is one thing that the current state of the world is showing us. There has never been such a need for new perspectives on peace, for new initiatives and radical changes. For that reason, while the current leaders sometimes seem to struggle to address the issues we are facing, I'm looking forward to hearing the young peacebuilders who have been invited tonight. New insights from a new generation are welcome to finally pave the way towards a less troubled world. It is also an honor to be sharing the stage with Mary Robinson, whose impressive career is a model to us all. Miss Robinson was a leading force for change and progress as the first female president of the Republic of Ireland. She was then an influential UN commissioner and remains a champion of human rights. Her decades of tireless dedication to peace and dialogue give her a unique insight that I am also looking forward to hearing tonight. Geneva, as a central focal point in the history of human rights and diplomacy, prides itself on its values of peace and dialogue. As the birthplace of Henri Dunant and the International Committee of the Red Cross, as a place that was chosen as the headquarters of the League of Nations and then of the United Nations, we feel like we have a special responsibility. The responsibility of helping, as much as we can, all the peace builders that come to us in search of a more stable future. In that regard, the city and the canton of Geneva are proud to support initiatives such as this one. We will always, as best as we can, make sure to provide you with the right conditions to achieve your goals, so that we don't lose hope and keep on fighting, even when the battle seems almost impossible to win. In our talks, we should also remember Kofi Annan and his long-standing vision in favor of peace. His legacy lives on through his foundation and through events like tonight. I want to thank you once again for the invitation, and I hope tonight's discussion will open new perspectives that will allow us all to think of a better tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madame Barbie-Chapuis. Indeed, there has never been such need for new perspectives. And thank you, Professor Venman. And as you said, we need to be planning for peace, not for war. I seem to remember somebody very wise saying, war is made in the minds of men. And I think we should add, war is made in the minds of men and women. I beg your pardon, peace is made in the minds of men. I get carried away sometimes, forgive me. Indeed. Stop improvising, Ahmed. It is time now for our keynote speaker, Mary Robinson, Chair of the Elders, Irish politician and human rights advocate, Ireland's first female president, and former United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. President Robinson will reflect, I believe, on the need for leadership for peace as displayed by Kofi Annan throughout his life against a backdrop of rising global insecurity. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mary Robinson.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear Nan, dear Zaid, the radical youth wing of the elders, it's an honor and a pleasure to be with you here tonight in my capacity as chair of the elders to deliver the Kofi Annan Peace Address in this Geneva Peace Week. But the pleasure is bittersweet for two reasons. Firstly, because Kofi is a dearly missed friend. We worked together over many years when he was Secretary General and I was High Commissioner for Human Rights, and then as founding members of the Elders. We feel the lack of his calm voice, his wisdom and moral authority more than ever in these troubled times. This is why tonight is a doubly bittersweet occasion. As has already been mentioned, it's hard to speak of peace from the comfort and calm of Geneva when so many people around the world are suffering from the cruelties of conflict, From Gaza and Lebanon to Sudan, Ukraine, Myanmar, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and countless other wars that rarely, if ever, make it into our headlines. As Kofi knew instinctively and showed throughout his life, you cannot have peace without leadership, and you cannot show leadership without courage. This is why I'm delighted to have the opportunity later this evening to talk with the rising peacebuilders supported by his foundation. I look forward to hearing their perspectives on how to build sustainable peace that can be passed down across the generations. As Kofi so often said, you are never too young to lead, and you are never too old to learn. While preparing for this address and observing the terrible destruction wrought by Israel's ongoing military assault in Gaza and Lebanon, my mind turned to another quote from Kofi, this time when he was still serving as UN Secretary General during the last open war between Israel and Lebanon in 2006. When the UN Security Council finally agreed Resolution 1701 in August 2006 to end the conflict, he said, and I quote, "War is not politics by another means, but represents a catastrophic failure of political skill and imagination." How true that was then, and how true it is today, as we contemplate the awful cost of 12 months of killings, destruction, and displacement in Gaza, and now across the Middle East, following the horrific Hamas terror attacks of the 7th of October 2003. Civilians are paying the price for the failure of political leaders to de-escalate and seriously address the root causes of a conflict that has been raging for over 75 years. Some 42,000 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed, most of whom are women and children. Hamas is still cruelly holding around 100 Israeli hostages, many of whom are now sadly feared dead. More than 1 million people in Lebanon have been displaced from their homes, with some even seeking refuge in Syria. Israeli civilians in the north of the country are no safer from rocket attacks than they were before this latest Israeli assault, while Palestinians in the West Bank are suffering ever-intensifying attacks from Israeli troops and also armed settlers. Without an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and Lebanon, the release of all hostages and arbitrarily detained Palestinian prisoners, and full compliance by all parties to the conflict with international humanitarian law, the situation will surely worsen. Leadership for peace has never been more urgent, but never, I'm sad to say, so lacking. One consequence of this failure of leadership is the increasingly systematic violations of international law in conflict settings and impunity for those who commit atrocities. I don't need to remind an audience in Geneva, the home of the ill-fated League of Nations, of what can happen when extremist political leaders flaunt their contempt for the international rule of law, and their moderate counterparts cannot muster the courage needed to defend it and the institutions it underpins. But I worry that as the United Nations, the League's successor, approaches its 80th birthday, the world is witnessing an alarming escalation of conflict and a steady erosion of the established norms underpinning international law. Powerful states, including some permanent members of the Security Council, are in breach of the UN Charter, and institutions like the International Criminal Court are under attack. Leaders are resorting to military aggression and retaliation instead of the hard work of political dialogue. Women have not been given the meaningful roles in peace building promised by multiple Security Council resolutions. Leaders must uphold international law consistently. In the year 2024, this should be a truism that scarcely needs repeating, but instead it is a shockingly urgent appeal. Contempt for the rules governing our multilateral institutions has a knock-on effect across all aspects of global peace and security. Russia's war of aggression on Ukraine, now well into its third year, is a flagrant violation of the UN Charter, with the Security Council paralysed by the veto. A permanent member blocking action on a conflict to which they are clearly a party violates both the spirit and the letter of the UN Charter. Article 27.3 is clear that a party to a dispute shall abstain from voting, and I welcome the fact that the Pact for the Future, passed at the UN Summit for the Future in New York last month, specifically calls for this provision to be implemented. I encourage member states to take meaningful action to enforce this important element of the UN Charter. We're also seeing some Security Council members undermine decisions of the International Court of Justice and threaten the International Criminal Court and its officials. It's vital that our international judicial institutions are supported and their decisions upheld. International law must be applied consistently, regardless of who is held accountable. States who use their veto or other diplomatic means to shield their geopolitical allies are ultimately acting against their own interests. Because if the international rule of law fails, we are all vulnerable to unchecked aggression and violations of our fundamental rights. From Gaza to Ukraine and Sudan to Myanmar, we can see how impunity for atrocity crimes and breaches of international rule of law is emboldening some political leaders to scorn dialogue and political solutions, seeking instead to retain or consolidate their power by military means alone, with scant regard for international humanitarian law and at great cost to the civilian population. So I pose the question, and I want us to think about this question very deeply, and I have a very personal viewpoint that I'm going to put to you. Why are we seeing such a failure of leadership? I want to express a personal reflection here. As an elder, but not as chair of the elders, because we have not, as elders, discussed this precise issue. I have come to believe that the heart of the problem is that the world has been run predominantly by male leaders. It's not that women are better than men. The truth is that the world needs the balance of differing perspectives of leadership and power. Men in power tend to be more hierarchical, more interested in hard power, less concerned perhaps about being servant leaders. Women leaders, especially those who have come out of the women's networks and the women's movement, tend to be more collaborative, listening, and problem-solving in practical ways. To have the dominance of one kind of leadership is not healthy for our world and has contributed, I believe, to the stark situation we're in. The current failure of leadership is not gender neutral. For far too long, we have paid lip service to the idea of gender equality. At leadership level, it should mean parity of participation in power and decision-making. It should mean that roughly half the leaders in the world would be women, and that cabinets and parliaments should have parity of membership between male and female members. Perhaps we should experiment with co-leadership of global organizations in order to benefit fully from the differing perspectives of leadership. So reflect with me honestly for a moment. Do we really believe we would have as many wars, as many geopolitical divides, as many autocratic leaders with populist solutions, if women exercised their due power at the highest level in our world? So I believe it's time that a group of countries would champion this idea, both nationally and at the global level. And having said all that, we should celebrate the men who have been great leaders for peace. One such was Martti Ahtisaari, the former president of Finland, whom Kofi and I both respected enormously, and with whom we worked most fruitfully as members of the Elders. Tomorrow will mark the first anniversary of his passing, and it feels appropriate tonight to recall his wise words when he received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2008. In his acceptance speech, Martti reminded us that, and I quote, "Wars and conflicts are not inevitable, that all conflicts can be resolved, and that peace is a question of will." We cannot simply accept certain conflicts as unsolvable or acquiesce to the idea that military aggression offers a lasting solution. Nor can we limit our efforts to managing the humanitarian impact from one cycle of violence to the next. I've been emphasizing gender equality, and gender equality is also highly relevant to peacemaking and peace building. As we approach the 25th anniversary of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325, which launched the Women, Peace and Security agenda, we should acknowledge that this agenda has never reached its full potential. There have been many commendable national action plans on women, peace and security, and countries like my own Ireland and Mexico and Kenya have ensured it has been placed on the Security Council's agenda. However, it's a grim but unavoidable fact that the decisions that most affect peace and security are still primarily, and in some cases exclusively, made by men, often the same men who resorted to violence in initiating the conflict to begin with. This is why the Elders are calling for the meaningful participation and inclusion of senior women in peacemaking and peace-building processes to be regarded as mandatory. Those engaging in political processes seeking to end conflict, the UN or other international actors, must insist on a meaningful role for women as a prerequisite for support, not as a nice-to-have. We also support calls for greater investment in the essential role of women in peacebuilding, including through an increase of funding to women's organizations working in fragile and conflict-affected states, to at least 1% of official development assistance. The Secretary-General is to be commended for tracking this in his annual Women, Peace and Security report, but the level of funding is far off target, currently standing at just 0.3%. In fact, the percentages are very low anyway. I'd like to see them higher, but that's a reality. Alarmingly, recent research indicates that this funding has decreased from $191 million to $142 million in the past 3 years. Meeting this target would be transformative of these organizations, while the financing requirement is, of course, dwarfed by other funding streams, notably military expenditure. As we're speaking of leadership, we must also note that the post of UN Secretary-General has been held continuously by men since the inception of the organization after the Second World War. The Elders therefore support calls that the next UN Secretary-General should be a woman. And a woman appointed through a transparent process that seeks the most qualified candidate. Whoever the next Secretary-General is, she will inherit an organization in sore need of comprehensive and radical reform to make it fit for the world of 2025, not 1945. When the wider world looks to the UN, it looks first and foremost to the Security Council. But if we're honest, we must recognize that the Council is widely seen as ineffective or worse, a relic of the post-Second World War era. Reform is urgent and overdue, and it is possible. In the 1960s, the successful drive to expand the Security Council was driven by the General Assembly. permanent council members can only block charter reform at the level of their national legislatures. And once the Assembly had voted, the P5 eventually ratified the change. Calls to expand permanent membership are long-standing, but new indefinite permanent members with veto privileges would only increase ineffectiveness and repeat the founding flaw of the Council, and it is a flaw. Instead, a new category of longer-term re-electable membership on a regional basis, as some models have proposed, should be incorporated, and this would create positive and democratic incentives for longer-term presence on the Council. The veto remains the core problem in the working methods of the Council, and the elders call on member states to sign up to initiatives that seek to prohibit the use of the veto where populations are being subjected to or threatened by genocide or other mass atrocities. If the veto cannot be eliminated in the short term, models and practices that limit its use and increase its political costs must be supported. The General Assembly must again play the lead role in reform, and the elders call for a coalition of member states to lead a reform proposal that increases both the representatives and the effectiveness of the Security Council. Beyond this, the international peace and security architecture must evolve to tackle not just the multiple destabilizing conflicts across the world, but also the existential threats facing all humanity: the climate and nature crisis, the nuclear proliferation, and the risk of pandemics. We see the climate and nature crisis and conflict fueling each other. In my work as a member of President Zelensky's high-level working group on the environmental consequences of the war in Ukraine, including during 2 visits to Kyiv last year, I've seen extensive evidence of crimes against the environment as part of Russia's war of aggression. We're also gaining an increasing understanding of the complex but very real structural effect that the climate and nature crisis is having on conflict globally. Changes in climate that affect livelihoods and living conditions, from rising sea levels to desertification and destruction of arable land, lead inevitably to changes and tensions that can directly increase the risk of violence and conflict. And another existential threat. Despite the threat of nuclear conflict being at its highest point since the Cuban Missile Crisis, we're seeing an unraveling of the agreements that have mitigated the risk of a global nuclear war. Instead of pursuing disarmament, as they have committed to under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, nuclear states are modernizing and increasing the arsenals that threaten all of humanity and spending billions each year on this, huge amounts of money that could be so much better spent. We're approaching the 5-year anniversary of the outbreak of a pandemic that killed millions and cost trillions. Yet, our leaders have not yet delivered a meaningful pandemic treaty that would protect us from the health, security, and other risks that will come with future outbreaks that scientists tell us are inevitable, and that we're currently seeing play out, indeed, with Mpox. So, before I finish, let me just repeat my concern that the dominance of male leadership, without the balancing perspective of female and even feminist leadership, is a real problem. And now I come to another approach to leadership which the elders are very keen to promote. So let me conclude with the elders' call for the only way we believe to tackle these complex, interlinked threats, which is through long-view leadership. Long-view leadership means showing the determination to resolve intractable problems, not just manage them, the wisdom to make decisions based on scientific evidence and reason, and the humility to listen to all those affected. Long-view leadership must have the moral strength to address both current concerns and long-term risks, taking on vested interests where necessary, and prioritizing a better future for humanity over short-term political gain. Kofi Annan was a long-term leader throughout his life. So was Nelson Mandela, the founder of the elders, and Archbishop Tutu, our first chair. And so I hope will be the young peace builders that we're going to listen to, and I'm looking forward to being on a panel with later this evening. Because the reality is that only through dialogue, solidarity, compassion, determination, and humility can we overcome the challenges of today and tomorrow and build a world with peace, justice, gender equality, and human rights for all. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Secretary General Mary Robinson? It has a certain ring to it, does it not? Woo! Well, you have at least 1,000 voters here. Yes. Thank you, President Robinson, for such a wise, inspiring, and thoughtful address. And now it's time for a musical interlude. I would like to invite a young member of the orchestra of the International School of Geneva, Junseo. Do I pronounce it correctly? Where are you, Junseo? Junseo. Please join us. Please join us upstage. Junseo and members of the orchestra of the International School of Geneva will be performing a Bach Prelude on the cello. Is it Junseo or Junseo? Thank you. Thank you so much, Junseo. And now it's time for the dialogue and debate. Rising Peacebuilders. This debate aims to bridge international perspectives on peacebuilding and to explore innovative strategies for fostering sustainable peace. Our three young peacebuilders will engage in what we expect will be a thought-provoking discussion with Mary Robinson and Zaid Ra'ad al-Hussein. Zaid, of course, is a younger member of the elders, president and CEO of the International Peace Institute, and former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights himself. I would like to invite to the stage Mary Robinson and Zaid Ra'ad al-Hussein. You might like to use the stairs in the middle, they're closer to the seats, and our three young peacebuilders, Nashiba Nakabira, African Youth Ambassador of the African Union for Peace in East Africa, and member of the Accountability Hubs program of the Kofi Annan Foundation. Marui Pahuja, Creative Leadership Youth Team, Co-Initiative of Change Foundation. Ariza and Nokum, extremely together leader of the Kofi Annan Foundation. Please take your seats. Well, this is comfortable and cozy. Well, I have a question for each of our Mike, but you can hear me perfectly well, can you not? Hello, hello, hello. Is that better? All right. I have to watch the time because they're very strict here. Not as strict as the Palais des Nations, where the conference, okay. Oh. My first question is addressed to you, Mary Robinson, as the future Secretary General of the to give us advice. Maybe you can give some advice to our three female peacebuilders on gender equality. What lessons do you draw from your leadership at the national level in Ireland and at the global level on ways to achieve meaningful change to confront injustices, to bridge divides, and to bring people together?
Well, I think I have two examples. One when I was running for president in 1990, and one when I was High Commissioner that might be of some help. I don't know that these three young peacebuilders need much advice, but we'll try and give it a little wisdom. When I was nominated to run to be the Labour Party candidate, though I ran as an independent, I was 100 to 1 outside. That's what the bookmaker said. My chances were 100 to 1 against. And I started to listen to the Irish people, and I discovered that Ireland was in a particular moment where the country had benefited from membership of the European Union. Money had come into rural Ireland, and the people wanted the same facilities that the cities had. They wanted sports facilities, facilities for people with disabilities, for elderly people, etc. And they knew that the government wasn't going to provide them. So they volunteered. We had an incredible time of sort of self-development locally in communities. And there's an Irish word, mehel, that I heard all the time. And I was listening, and I started to repeat this. So people found that I was saying what they understood and what was very meaningful to them. So part of my, I think, leadership is bringing people with you. You know, you listen and you bring people with you. And the second example that I just wanted to refer to was, I always hoped when I went to a country of difficulty, and high commissioners tended to go where human rights were being abused, that before I met any government representative, I would meet the NGOs. I would meet the human rights defenders on the ground, because they would tell me what I needed to really know before I could actually say with any kind of credibility and authority, because I had learned from the people on the ground. And I think that also was very important as far as I was concerned. So, for what it's worth.
Listen to the people.
Yes.
And I'm sure that upset the governments when you went there. So the next question I have is addressed to Zeid Ra'ad Al Hussein. When you left your post as High Commissioner, you said you did not want to, and I quote, genuflect in front of governments. What is your advice to young people as to how to hang on to your principles when confronting powerful actors? And are there times when compromise is necessary to make progress?
Well, first of all, I am delighted to be on the stage again with Mary. And Mary, what an amazing speech. So it was incredible. Did I say such a thing? So, well, obviously you can compromise on certain things. You can compromise on delivery, although not very much. You can compromise on timing. You can embellish. You can turn the lexicon around. But the message has to be crystal clear. And I don't think you can compromise on that. But you can package it in a way that it will open the mind of the person that you're speaking to. And I think Kofi was an arch practitioner of that. He could do it in a way which no other person I worked with could do. An amazing sort of skill he had. But there is another thing, and then it's something that we have in sort of almost instinctively within us. We sort of all know really who we are. And I do this quite often, so if you bear with me just for 2 minutes. Try and imagine a situation where you're 6 or 7 years old, you're smaller than all the other school children in your class, and you're in the school playground, and you see a larger child, bully, if you want to name it, name them that, and we all understand that often they themselves are being victimized in other conditions, so we don't judge them too far. But you can imagine this: the larger child is beating up younger children, and the younger children are lying on the floor, they're crying, and you then have to make a decision. Are you the person that runs to the children on the ground and you help them and you take them to the infirmary and you dust them off and you carry them if you need to? Are you the person that will immediately run for help and look for potentially a teacher or someone who's an adult to come and help? Or are you the person that goes up to the bully with the finger on their chest and you're pushing them back? At great risk to yourself if you're smaller than everyone else. All of us know who we are in that context. Or at least we sort of think we know, because we may have experienced it. I think the thing that all of us also understand as you get older is you can't be sure of what it is that you're capable of doing later on in life. You might think you're the person that will go and tend to the children on the ground, in which case you're a sort of humanitarian by instinct. And clearly, if you go up to the bully and you're pushing them back, you're human rights driven, and your very nature is not to withstand bullying. And if you're running for help and looking for someone who's going to come and stop this, you're probably going to be a politician. And you're going to claim the credit for stopping it. But in life, you don't know. And I thought I was the first and third. And I think when I see old friends from OHCHR there, and they helped me become the second. And so one doesn't know in life. And as you experience more of life, you realize that you are capable of things hitherto you thought were not possible.
Thank you very much. Inspiring story. So I shall now focus on our three young peace builders and ask each of them a personal question. Are you ready? Nashiba na kabira. Kabira means big in Arabic. Does it mean the same thing in your language?
It means a small forest.
A small forest. I was nowhere close, was I? Nashiba Nakabira, this is on interfaith dialogue. Given your experience in interfaith peace building, how can religious and cultural diversity be turned into a strength rather than, conflicts have shown us, a source of conflict in peace building efforts?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. And yes, I must acknowledge that if you look at all the conflicts that we've had on the continent, they've had a component of ethnic or religious-based identity, kind of conflict. So I strongly believe that whereas these two factors have been, a reason to cause conflict in some instances, at the same time, the religion and the tradition or the culture present an opportunity to contribute to building lasting peace. And the question here can be how, because I strongly believe that we have, for example, speaking about religion, almost all religions, say Christianity, Islam, the Judaism, they all put forward the component of peace, living together, reconciliation. So I think we need to leverage these components of religion that promote social justice, that promote peace, peaceful coexistence, and protection of one another. I want to speak about cases of violent extremism, for example, in Uganda, in Kenya, and some parts of West Africa. These have been based on religious kind of ideology. And I think it's because we've not tried to explore how best, again, we can tap into religion to counter some of these narratives that promote conflict and violent extremism. And I think now, speaking about the cultural diversity, I again believe that these have had a central part when it comes to political-based ethnic identities in Africa specifically, and I believe that what we need to do is fostering inclusion, bringing on board everyone, and also trying to utilize the councils of elders, which do still exist in certain settings, and also leveraging the interreligious councils. For example, we do have interreligious councils in Uganda, and these have been at the forefront of promoting dialogue, political dialogue in the country. And I think these structures, such structures, need to be strengthened in a way to promote representation of youth and women who have been traditionally marginalized in peace processes. So I strongly believe that we need also to create intergenerational dialogues and conversations, because again, in the African setting, that's where I come from, the elders still have the power. They still have they are still the ambassadors for wisdom. So I think it is only crucial if we try to tap into their experience and the young people bring on board innovation and creativity, so that at the end of the day we are able to contribute to lasting peace and also try to prevent the reoccurrence of conflict that has become a phenomenon. And I think if we could creatively find a way of incorporating the traditional aspect in some of the peace agreements, I think this is where this is a missing link, because if you try to incorporate the aspect of tradition and religion, there is a component of truth, which is key in preventing the reoccurrence of conflict.
Thank you very much. While you were speaking, I couldn't help think of that we have seen extremism from all religions, whether it was Judaism, Islam, or Christianity. And we have to find a way to get through to these extremists, which is extremely difficult. We can talk about this later unless you have a comment. Thank you, Nashiba. Marui Pahuja, this is on creative leadership. As someone who was working on the intersection of arts, science, and peace building, how can creative expression be used as a tool to heal communities divided by conflict? And what has been your most impactful experience using art in this way?
Thank you so much. When you started with, you're going to ask us something personal. I thought I would go with, what's the status of your heart?
Well, if you like, what is the status of your heart?
Yeah, that's what I was going to get to that. The status of my heart says that there is so much preciousness and privilege and power in this moment that we're all experiencing together. And yet there is this undercurrent of empathetic sadness that addresses what's happening in the world and all the atrocities that are happening. So there's coexistence of all of these emotions in my heart, and I speak from that space. But I also represent creativity and the arts. So I will start by first answering what has been the most impactful experience, and then go to how can that would stand its value for how can arts be used in creative expression, be used in this way. So the most impactful experience is that arts led me to peace building. One of my friends started an organization called People Beyond Borders in 2020, and just as it goes in a regular coffee conversation, and as coffee could lead to many insights and great moments coming into emergence, we were discussing what her mission and vision of People Beyond Borders is, and that was to create well-being and capacity building for refugees and internally displaced people around the world. And I proposed to her, having studied expressive arts therapy, why don't we use arts-based methodologies to build capacity for people? And 5 years down the line, we're seeing impactful results of this. And one of the stories is that of an Afghan refugee woman who was facilitated in her expression in expressive arts workshop on home and hope. Shared with her community and us what emerged through her visual art journey, her story for the first time of why she had to flee, her personal accounts, which she didn't find a way to express before safely. And this is how the arts can be used. And this is how she discovered new kinship with her community and a sense of liberation in the process. Our suffering and depression can also make us isolated. And the opposite of depression is joy, but it begins with expression. Arts hold safe space for individuals to express their grief, and as said before, for new perspectives to emerge. Creating spaces for individuals and communities being affected by conflict turn their feelings of hate and hurt to healing. And that cracks hearts open. Not just for the one being witnessed, but the ones witnessing too. And this is how communities are built. There are not enough spaces yet for dialogue through the arts between communities divided to come together. I would really hope for that. I'm a part of Initiatives of Change, which is a global movement born just after the Second World War, which focuses on building trust across the world's divides, that inspires, connects, and equips individuals and groups to be the change they want to see in the world. Co-Initiatives of Change Foundation is working on a program called Arts and Peace Encounters, and we would love for you to be a part of it. The role of arts is to give spaces for our imagination and challenge our limiting beliefs, to have more capacity to dance with the uncertainties of life, for storytelling, and to rediscover hope. Pascal's phrase is, you should always keep something beautiful in your mind. Well, arts is the way to enter in and be taken in by this beauty. If you've ever attended a concert or been to an art gallery, or this evening when we heard the cello player, Jung, it is not possible to not be taken in by this beauty. We experience the beauty through the arts. And that arts can, of course, be used to create impressions, but it can also be used for expressions. I'm yet to meet a single human being who isn't affected by conflict. And I'm yet to meet someone who isn't imaginative by nature. The power of imagination can be used for creation or destruction, and we see both in the world. The choice is really ours. People make communities, and to heal communities, we have to heal individuals and acknowledge each one's being and the communities they're a part of. The work of the arts is to honor the pain and facilitate active hope. Well, why arts, you ask? Because the arts have the capacity to engage us on a visceral level, accessing and tapping into parts of our consciousness that bypass our usual reflective thinking and introspection. A depth of ourselves not entirely accessible to us in any other way. The arts are not reserved only for the artists. Sure, they can skillfully cater to perspective expansion, but an immersive experience through arts-based approaches and interventions for healing, for regeneration, for witnessing can create effective ways in peace building. I can guarantee if I gave all of you some paper and some colors, and you give yourselves the permission to create and express your current inner landscape without judgment, we would have no two art pieces that look the same. And this is to say we all have unique experiences, and we do not yet have enough spaces to bear witness to that. And this is what creates unity in diversity. Arts honor unique expressions and our differences if we set precedents for it. Arts can allow us to bear witness to human dignity and creativity, even in the face of destruction and hopelessness. Arts can be used as a political tool to move the needle of the compass, redirecting us by shaking us and waking us and making us more aware and see beyond our limited views. Films are a great example of this. Artistic expressions can help us time travel, well, not literally, but give us a peep into another human suffering or hope, or these wide coexisting emotions that make us human, and can tell stories of people who have lived horrific experiences and wonderful experiences and found a way to share that which stand the test of time. And this is how we find our shared humanity, through time and to bear witness to our history and celebrate and be inspired to expand our horizons and our perspectives. My hope and work in this lifetime is to reignite the creative spark and spirit existing in each one of us and use that force towards building inner peace, rippling outwards into communities, systems, globally, and beyond.
Thank you so much, Nashiba. That was wonderful. Beautiful, actually. How long are you staying in Geneva?
I'm going to the 18th. You can come attend.
No. Did you bring enough papers and crayons here tonight?
We can make arrangements for that anytime.
No, interesting. Yes, and I'm sure you're familiar with the orchestra that was created by Barenboim.
Yeah, East-West.
East-West, composed of Israeli musicians and Palestinian musicians, many, many years ago. And it is an extremely artistic and emotional and beautiful endeavor. And they play beautifully, and they travel the world, and they sleep in the same hotels, and they eat the same food. And yes, we should send perhaps artists and musicians to areas of conflict and see what happens. Ariza and Nokum.
Present.
Good reaction. Digital peacekeeping, or rather peace building. You are exploring the use of digital media as a tool for peace. In today's hyper-connected world, what strategies do you believe are most effective for leveraging social media, that huge lion that we are facing, to promote peace and counter violent extremism?
Very easy question. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
So thank you for that. So I come from the Philippines, and we're widely recognized as patient zero in the global war against disinformation. So I have a lot to say. Bear with me. And a big part of this is because we spend so much time on social media. For several years, we topped world rankings in the number of hours spent online per day. I think in 1 year, it was up to 10 hours. Imagine, 10 hours per day. And until today, when I open my phone to want to see cute pictures of cats or look at funny memes, instead, I see photos and videos from Facebook talking about politicians, lies about this and that personality, lies about this and that leader. I also see videos on YouTube with titles like, "Everything you know about the war in Ukraine is a lie," or "The real story of Hamas that nobody will tell you." And you've seen those as well, right? We all know this war against disinformation is so critical because it's a war within all wars. Every war that's happening right now, there's a war of disinformation happening under it, over it, within it. And so my proposal is that the strategies we have to employ can't just form one solution. It has to be an ecosystem of strategies. So first, I want to talk about how we all have to fight disinformation. We have to be working against disinformation on all fronts. It's not just about relying on fact-checking tools like community notes on X, formerly Twitter. It's about providing society at different levels with knowledge and resources they can use to tackle disinformation. Who here has a first aid kit at their home? Thank you. So I'm hoping we have something like that, like a digital toolkit or something that helps us identify, process, and report fake news when we see it. And it's something that we should find in every home, family, peer group, school, office, local community, place of worship, and more. So it's all our job. Second, this is a bit heavy, but disinformation and polarizing content are most found on social media. And these social media platforms are owned by tech companies, big tech. And if we fail to hold big tech accountable, this problem is not going to go away. And for me, I see that big tech, it's big and honestly getting bigger because of an engine of growth, a philosophy of growth at all costs. And it's something that honestly has been running for so long that we never question it, but it's there. And because we're enamored by this growth at all costs philosophy, it's not just hurting the truth and information, it's hurting us and it's hurting the planet. While we work to demand the cooperation of these tech companies against disinformation, we should also work to rethink this engine of growth. Otherwise, even if we take one platform down, another one is going to come up that will still want to aim to turn eyeballs into dollars. Third, we live in a world where disinformation and propaganda can easily proliferate. It's like a perfect storm out there, and we have to change that. I'm very passionate about education. We work on education and peace building in the Philippines, so education is close to my heart. But I'm so heartbroken by the fact that in the Philippines and in many other countries, there is a crisis in education, in the quality and access to education. So there's that, but there's also the question of, are we getting the right education? How can we hope to critique media and propaganda if we're not taught to think critically? How can we hope to address disinformation if we're discouraged from asking hard questions in class? If we're never encouraged to stray beyond the four walls of our classrooms? If we're not exposed to other points of view? If we cannot even reassess history when we know it's written by the victors? So we need a different kind of education, and we need one that builds critical and moral leadership, where philosophy is as important as math, and where values are as important as language. And in Mary Robinson's words, long-term leadership, a long-term view of leadership. And we talk so much about how we have the vacuum of this kind of leadership these days, and I think a big reason for that is our education system. And finally, for me, I think to promote peace and counter extremism, we have to contend with the issue of identity. On social media, this means making an effort to, yes, recognize and respect that we all have different labels, different pronouns, different beliefs, different identities, different values. So we respect that, but we also have to see beyond them, to see what we share in common, to understand that we have common dreams and common goals, and to understand that we all want to live prosperously in this world. A good friend once told me that each human being is like a vessel, a cup. So each of us is like a cup with a different color, a different shape, a different size. And it's so easy to fixate on these different outward qualities. But it's also nice that we get to celebrate them. But we have to remember that in the end, we all carry the same water, the same kind of liquid drawn from the fountain of life. And I'm sitting here today beside Mary Robinson, amazing Mary Robinson, and all of these amazing people, you guys. But I also acknowledge that while we are so different, I'm a young peace builder from the Philippines. I run a very small nonprofit organization. I come from an interfaith family, both Muslim and Christian roots. I flew in here from Manila, 20 plus hours of travel. I'm very different from you, Mary Robinson. You are Mary Robinson, period. Former president, first female president of Ireland, future Secretary General. So we operate and we come from these different worlds. We all have these many, many different diverse external qualities, but I have to acknowledge that we share the same humanity, you and I. And I hope you see that, and I hope I see that, and that I continue to see that. So I just want to end by saying that for me, at the core of this war against disinformation is empathy. And not just any kind of empathy, but a critical empathy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You covered so much ground in that short presentation. Thank you so much.
I came prepared.
You obviously did, and so did your other two colleagues. Stunning. I kept thinking, if we were a country, you would be Minister of Digital Affairs, you would be Minister of the Arts. And what minister? Would you be Minister of Religious Affairs, or perhaps mediation, diversity? Yeah, all of that. Fantastic. And of course, Mary Robinson would be the president.
Why not the Prime Minister?
Why not the Prime Minister, indeed. Indeed. We have 5 minutes left in this segment, and we have to be quick because time is of the essence. I'd like to end with two questions. First, to our two members of the elders. Mary Robinson, may we start with you? In a few words, according to you, what are the key skills that young leaders need to develop to be effective in their peace-building efforts? The key skills.
Thank you for the question, but I think I'm going to ignore it and give you a completely different answer, which seems to me to fit.
That's what I expected, actually.
Which seems to me to fit the really very rich and thoughtful contributions we've heard from our three young peace builders. I say that because actually I was almost going to change what I said about long view leadership to fit the thinking we did in New York during the UN General Assembly. The Pact for the Future has great hooks, for the first time, real hooks for participation by different generations, particularly young people. I'm sure you've welcomed this. And I actually said, and I was going to repeat that at the end of my speech, I thought, no, I'll get a chance on the panel. I'm taking this chance, I'm ignoring your question. we are now saying, and we will be repeating this, that we want long view leadership that also builds in co-creation with different generations. That's what the world needs. The world is very young, and most of the decision makers are quite old. Not as old as me, maybe, but most of them are, pretty old. And we need the wisdom that we've heard from you three. We need it to be at the tables, co-creating. So long view leadership has been modified by the Pact for the Future and the kind of contributions that we've heard from you. We're now building in this idea of co-creating with different generations into our long view leadership. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for ignoring my question. Actually, the answer was brilliant. Zaid, would you like to ignore my question too? Because it's the same one. What are the key skills you would recommend to these young people in order to develop to be effective in whenever mind you?
I'm feeling so sorry for you that I will answer it. So I was at the World Health Summit a couple of days ago, and there was a colleague that we work with who has this amazing way of controlling meetings. And I think she presents a master class for direction and inspiration. And when I was analyzing her, she has superb knowledge, technical knowledge. But she has a few things which I wish I knew how to do when I was younger. One, she has very slow movements of the head. She's very still, and it conveys complete calmness and authority, not rapid movements. Two, she knows the power and energy of each word, so she chooses the words extremely carefully. And people listen. It's an amazing thing. It's an amazing gift if you have it. And you can really transport people in the right direction if it's allied also to principle and allied to a sense of courage. But most of all, we're in an age of so much self-promotion. Everyone's trying to outdo each other. And academics, sadly, are the worst, I think. And we don't need that. Let others speak about your idea. It's fine. It's okay. You'll come up with a new idea. You don't have to, and it'll come. And I think if you're positioning yourself with those skills in mind, you'll do an amazing amount of good in your life.
Well, thank you so much for that. I have a final. I will talk slowly and not move my head at all. In fact, I will bring the paper up to my head. To our young peace builders, one question to each of you. Let's start with Nashiba. What do you expect? What do you need from institutions at the global level and national levels, and from senior leaders, if anything, to facilitate your efforts to build peace?
I think you said, what do I need? I think it should be general. What do young people need? I think young people need safe spaces. And when I talk of safe spaces, I don't mean absence of guns, maybe in the neighborhood. Talking about a conducive operating environment. Talking about the favorable policies and legal frameworks. Young people having access to relevant information and being able to use this information as a tool to engage at the different level. Today we have the different frameworks at the different level. The young people able to understand what is embedded in some of these frameworks at the global, continental, and the regional level, even at the local level. So I think we need to localize the conversation so that even the young people at the grassroots, including those who have not gone to school, are able to understand and make sense out of this information so that it informs their level of engagement and interaction. And I think, thirdly, young people need capacity building. they need to have the tools, they need to be equipped, they need to have as well platforms where they share, they need to be appreciated. Some of the times the work, the energies of young people go unrecognized, but I think young people need to be recognized because that itself is empowering. So I strongly believe that that is also key in addition to financial support. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Nashiba. It's something I remember Kofi Annan always advocated. Young people have to be given a seat at the table. Marwe, same question. What do young people need or expect from elders, statesmen, and women from institutions at the global and national level?
Well, I want to start by saying that we're in a point in time where we're seeing unimaginable suffering in Palestine and Lebanon and so many other parts of the world. The UN Secretary General says it and nothing happens. The peacekeeping force has been asked to be pulled out of Lebanon. So this may really feel like screaming into the void, but it cannot be said enough number of times. Survival is the foremost. To even start repairing or creating, we need to first act on stopping the source of the wound, to stop the genocide happening in Palestine, and the immense suffering happening in Lebanon, Sudan, Somalia, Ukraine, and so many innumerable places in the world. We are in a massive humanitarian crisis. My expectation would also be for the peace-building community to take the arts-based approaches more seriously, to apply arts as a solid relational approach for storytelling, for conflict transformation and trauma healing. And we certainly need the nerve of the creative forces to do so. And when the time comes, which it will, we actively turn to the power of arts to heal and restore, and to continue to create more such spaces and intervention in ways we already can, and in the spaces we already can. I represent Creative Leadership, which has two major projects, which is Voices from the Map and Weaving Our Narratives. And both of these projects are dedicated towards storytelling for the people in marginalized communities, for voices that are not heard, for stories that have not come to the surface. And in that witnessing, there is a transformation that happens. And like I said, of the one being witnessed and the ones witnessing. We need more spaces for stories, actual, real, raw stories of people. And as you said, I think we need Mary Robinson. We really need more women leaders. And to be midwives of peace. And we also need indigenous voices that help us remember with reverence our interconnectedness and bring us back to nature and therefore bring us back to ourselves.
Thank you very much. Inspiring. Ariza, same question.
Yes, so very quickly, just to add to what my wonderful colleagues have said already, if we need long view leadership, we also need long view funding. And I hope that's something that can be more accessible now to young people, even though they often don't have the credentials or sometimes the academics or the expertise to back up what they want. I hope that we can still make long-term, flexible and responsive funding available to them. And lastly, for me, a plea. So self-promotion has been mentioned already, but I'm sure that most of the young people working in peace building are not here because we need to be recognized or because we need awards or because we want the Nobel Prize. We're here because we're desperate. This is our future at stake, our survival, the air we breathe, the food we eat, whether we could someday still travel and see beautiful cities like Geneva, whether we could make art, whether we could have the space to find out our true potential. And I'm so lucky to be standing here. We're so lucky to be sitting here because millions of young people sadly do not exist on this earth anymore because of conflict, and they cannot have the same privileges we have. And this is also the future of our children, if we ever want to have children. So with so much at stake, I hope that when we involve young people, they're not there to tick a box or pose for a photo or just to offer a different flavor for a nice Kofi Annan Geneva peace address. I hope we're really here because you're listening. And if I could talk to world leaders, I would ask you, please, don't undo our efforts. As young peace builders, it often feels like we take one tiny step forward, but the rest of the world takes 10 steps back. So leaders, look into yourselves and ask why you allow conflict. Why do you wage war? Is it ego, power, money, faith, immortality? And I hope you understand that while you achieve this, whatever it is, while you win, the rest of the world is losing. You have your bullets, you have your bombs, but for now and for many young people, I think it feels sometimes that our only weapon is hope. But sometimes that's enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Ariza. This is a very heavy, rich meal that we've had here from the three of you, indeed. And I think, Corinne Momal-Vanyan, you should package this and send it to all the leaders of the world. Maybe they'll see reason. Maybe not. So I'd like to thank Nashiba Nakabira, Maure Pahuja, and Ariza Ann Nokum on your inspiring contributions tonight. We have, please, yes, please, round of applause. And that is the end of the dialogue. We have one last segment, and that is Zaid Rad al-Hussein. Would you please go to the lectern and share with us, if you didn't hear my description of this gentleman to my left, he is the former High Commissioner for Human Rights, the President and CEO of the International Peace Institute, and a member of the Elders. Would you share some reflections on your career, please? And on the future of multilateralism and the pressing challenges to international cooperation in 3 minutes.
So I had nothing prepared because I wanted to listen to the three peace builders. And I mean, it's extraordinary. I would be embarrassed and ashamed to tell you what I was doing at their age. Nothing profound, and my knowledge was very limited. But it occurred to me when trying to sum up what it is that we're trying to push forward. It's a sense that one, throughout their life, if they're going to make a change, have to be prepared at some stage to self-sacrifice something or sacrifice something. If you're not willing to do it, and goodness, let's hope you never have to do it, but you have to be willing to do it. Because if you're willing to do it, you then are seen as someone with a basic sense of integrity. Most of the peace building one does in one's life is actually within one's family. It is the tender lines of contact that bind people who grow old together, who are tied in a sense of love, but often the strains of life can impact themselves. And between aunts and uncles, brothers, sisters and parents, these strains come alive. And one often has to take a stand and make oneself unpopular at times, which makes one feel extremely uncomfortable. In the larger sense, in the larger landscape, one has to think of it in terms that can be really quite stark. So Ariza at the end spoke about what needs to be done, and it reminded me of this famous story of the rector of Salamanca in 1936. The Spanish Civil War had been raging. The story has been told many times, and it is disputed by some historians, so I have to note that. But the rector of Salamanca, Unamuno, was asked to take the stage in front of Franco's wife and a leader of the nationalist cause, a man by the name of Astray, Milan Astray. And the hall was filled with phalangists, and the mood was very dark. And Unamuno had crossed from Barcelona over to the nationalist side. And he got up to the lectern like this. And he spoke in a way which was dramatic. And he said to Astray, "You may have the guns and you may have the might, but you will never have the ability to persuade." And immediately, Astray's bodyguard lifted his machine gun and pointed it at Unamuno. And the phalangists went mad in the hall, and they started saying, "Viva la muerte! Viva la muerte!" And only by the intercession of the intervention, of Franco's wife was Unamuno's life spared. The most interesting thing about the story was Unamuno was not a Republican. He was not from the left. He was from the right. He was religious, and he was from the right. But he saw the banalities, the evils of war on both sides. He'd seen what the Republicans had done, and he'd seen what the nationalists had done, and he couldn't keep quiet. But he was prepared to risk his life to say something. And that gives you integrity. And if you have integrity, people will listen. And if people listen, you can build peace, and you can make your mark. I always think that finally that it's not just building a life on the basis of principles, but it's the way you think. You know, I teach at a rather prestigious university. I've done it for 5 years. The dialectic mind is the creative mind. Incidentally, the dyslexic mind is the creative mind. So anyone who's dyslexic here, congratulations, it's a real asset. It's amazing to see what a dialectic mind can produce. And a good idea immediately gives you leadership. And then you need a mentor. And I was lucky as a 30-year-old who knew nothing about the world to have as my mentor for a few months when I was a special assistant, Kofi Annan. And I just used to think, I'm the luckiest 30-year-old alive. I just used to watch Kofi work with people. And his EQ was ginormous. I mean, I've never seen someone who has the EQ that Kofi has, let alone the IQ and everything else that he carried. An amazing thing. And so for all of you who are about to chart your life through waters that are going to be treacherous, please watch and listen to any footage you can find of the great Kofi Annan and the great Mary Robinson, and you'll do your life a lot of good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zaid. There's a lot of wisdom flying around in this room tonight, and you have all given us much food for thought, so thank you. And thank you, the audience, for bearing with us for over an hour and a half. I'm sorry I couldn't control. Yeah. But as I said, it's been a delightful evening. I hope you think so too. I hope you'll go home feeling enriched, as I will. And don't forget to get your copy of the Kofi Annan Foundation annual report, which is sitting outside waiting for you to be inspired further. Thank you and good night.